The stagecoach rattled to a stop in front of the timber office in Custer, South Dakota, and Helena Sutherland stepped down onto the dusty street with legs that trembled from more than just the 3-day journey through the Black Hills. She clutched her carpetbag against her chest like a shield, her green eyes scanning the rough settlement that would become her new home, and she wondered for the 1,000th time if she had made a terrible mistake accepting a proposal from a man she had never met. The advertisement had seemed like divine intervention when she had found it tucked into the newspaper at the Boston boarding house, where she had been living since her husband's death, 2 years prior. Prosperous timber merchant in Custer, South Dakota, seeks refined wife for companionship and partnership. Must be of good character and willing to embrace frontier life. She had responded out of desperation more than hope, her funds dwindling and her late husband's debts still haunting her despite his passing. What she had not mentioned in her carefully worded letters was that her first marriage had been a nightmare of broken promises and cruelty disguised as love. Mrs. Sutherland, a thin man in a bowler hat, approached, his smile not quite reaching his pale blue eyes. "I'm Frederick Dalton. I've been handling the arrangements for your arrival." Helena's stomach tightened with unease. "I was expecting to meet Mr. Morrison." "Yes, well, there's been a complication." Frederick's smile grew strained. "Perhaps we should discuss this somewhere more private, the hotel dining room." 20 minutes later, Helena sat across from Frederick in the modest dining room of the Dakota Hotel, her hands folded tightly in her lap as she listened to words that turned her blood to ice. Thomas Morrison passed away 3 weeks ago, a logging accident in the high timber. Frederick dabbed at his forehead with a handkerchief despite the cool September air. "He had already paid for your passage, and by the time we received word of your departure from Boston, it was too late to send a telegram to stop you." Helena felt the room tilt slightly. "I see. However, there is a solution." Frederick leaned forward, his voice taking on a wheeling quality. "Thomas owed me a considerable sum of money. His timber contracts, his equipment, everything now belongs to me as payment for his debts. I find myself in need of a wife, and you find yourself in need of a husband. We could simply proceed as planned." Every instinct Helena possessed screamed at her to refuse. There was something in Frederick's eyes, something cold and calculating that reminded her too much of her first husband. But she had $17 to her name and no return ticket to Boston. She had sold everything she owned to come west, burning her bridges with a finality that now seemed like madness. "I need time to think," she said quietly. Frederick's expression hardened. "You have until tomorrow morning. The next stage east doesn't leave for 2 weeks, and I doubt the hotel will extend credit to a woman with no prospects." He stood, adjusting his hat. "I'm a reasonable man, Mrs. Sutherland. I can provide you with a comfortable life. I suggest you consider your options carefully." After he left, Helena sat alone in the dining room, fighting back tears of frustration and fear. She had come west to escape one trap, only to walk directly into another. The weight of her mistake pressed down on her shoulders until she could barely breathe. "You look like you could use something stronger than tea." Helena looked up to find a woman in her 50s standing beside her table, wearing a practical split skirt and a knowing expression. She had silver-streaked dark hair pulled back in a no-nonsense bun and eyes that held both kindness and steel. "I'm Margaret Fletcher. I own the general store down the street." The woman sat down without waiting for an invitation. "And I couldn't help but overhear some of your conversation with Frederick Dalton. That man has all the charm of a rattlesnake and half the honor." Despite everything, Helena felt a small smile tug at her lips. "I seem to have a talent for finding myself in impossible situations." "Mail order bride for Thomas Morrison," Helena nodded. though apparently I'm too late for that particular disaster. Margaret signaled to the server for coffee. Thomas was a good man, just unlucky. That logging accident wasn't entirely an accident, if you ask me. Frederick had been pressuring him to sell for months. Convenient that the brake lines on the timber sled snapped when Thomas was the only one on the mountain that day. Helena felt a chill run down her spine. Are you suggesting murder? I'm suggesting that Frederick Dalton is a dangerous man to cross, and an even more dangerous man to marry. Margaret fixed her with a serious look. You need to leave Custer as soon as possible. I don't have the funds for passage. Then you need to find work until you do. Margaret tapped her fingers on the table thoughtfully. The schoolteacher position is filled and the hotel isn't hiring, but there might be another option, though it's unconventional. At this point, I'm willing to consider anything that doesn't involve becoming Mrs. Frederick Dalton. Margaret's eyes gleamed with what might have been amusement. There's a man who lives up in the high timber, about 10 miles outside town. Keeps to himself mostly, comes down once a month for supplies. He's been looking for someone to help him with his trapping operation through the winter. Someone who can skin and prepare pelts, help with the tanning, maybe do some cooking. It's hard work and you'd be isolated up there, but he pays fair wages and he's an honest man. Helena considered this. The idea of spending winter alone in the mountains with a strange man should have terrified her, but somehow the thought of marrying Frederick Dalton was far more frightening. What do you know about this man? His name is Knox Farrell. He came to the Black Hills about 5 years ago, built himself a solid cabin in the high country. He was a cavalry scout before that, knows the mountains better than any white man I've ever met. He's quiet, respectful, and he minds his own business. Some folks think he's strange because he prefers the company of the wilderness to people, but I've found him to be decent and trustworthy. Margaret paused. He's not a young man, mind you. I'd guess he's in his mid-30s. Big fellow, looks like he could wrestle a bear and come out ahead. But I've never heard tell of him being cruel or improper with women. How do I meet him? He's due in town tomorrow for his monthly supply run. I'll introduce you if you're serious about this. Margaret's expression grew stern, but you need to understand what you'd be getting into. Winter in the Black Hills is brutal. You'd be snowed in for months at a time, working hard every day and living in close quarters with a man you don't know. It's not an easy life. My life has never been easy, Helena said quietly. But I would rather face an honest hardship than a dishonest comfort. Margaret nodded with approval. Then meet me at my store tomorrow morning early. Knox usually arrives just after dawn. That night, Helena lay awake in her small hotel room, listening to the sounds of Custer settling into darkness. Somewhere in the distance, a piano played a mournful tune, and closer by, men's voices rose and fell in the saloon below. She thought about her first husband, Richard, who had courted her with poetry and promises, only to reveal himself as a man who used his fists when words failed him, and who gambled away every dollar they had. She thought about the fear that had become her constant companion during those 3 years of marriage, and how his death in a carriage accident had brought her not grief, but relief so profound she had felt guilty for months afterward. She had sworn after Richard's death that she would never again put her fate in a man's hands, yet here she was, preparing to do exactly that. But perhaps, she reasoned, there was a difference between marrying a man and working for him. One was a prison with no escape. The other was simply a job that would give her the means to eventually control her own destiny. Dawn came cold and clear, painting the Black Hills in shades of gold and amber. Helena dressed in her most practical traveling dress, pinned her auburn hair into a tight bun, and made her way to Fletcher's general store. Margaret was already there, sweeping the front porch and watching the eastern road with a practiced eye. "He's coming," she said, pointing to a figure on horseback leading a pack mule up the main street. Helena felt her breath catch as the man drew closer. Knox Farrell was indeed a big man, broad-shouldered and tall, sitting his horse with the easy grace of someone who had spent most of his life in the saddle. He wore buckskin pants and a heavy wool shirt, and his dark hair fell past his collar, held back by a leather cord. His face was weathered and bearded, with strong features that might have been carved from the granite of the mountains he called home. But it was his eyes that caught Helena's attention when he finally looked her way, clear gray eyes that held a wariness she recognized, because she saw it in her own mirror every morning. "Morning, Margaret," he said, his voice a deep rumble as he dismounted. He moved with the controlled power of a mountain cat, economical and purposeful. "Morning, Knox. I have someone I'd like you to meet." Margaret gestured to Helena. "This is Mrs. Helena Sutherland. She's new to Custer and finds herself in need of employment. I recalled you mentioning you could use help with your trapping operation this winter." Knox studied Helena with an intensity that made her want to squirm, but she held his gaze steadily. She saw him taking in her practical dress, her work-worn hands, the determined set of her jaw. Whatever he saw must have satisfied something because he gave a small nod. "Can you skin a rabbit without wasting the pelt?" he asked bluntly. "I can. My father was a hunter in New Hampshire. He taught me how to dress game before I was 10 years old. Can you cook?" "Plain food, but it's filling and I don't burn it." "Can you work hard without complaining?" "I can work harder than you might think, Mr. Farrell." Something that might have been approval flickered in his eyes. "The work is brutal. My cabin is 10 miles up in the high timber, and once the heavy snows come, we won't be able to get to town until spring. You'd be up every morning before dawn, working until dark, skinning, scraping, stretching pelts, helping me run the trap lines when needed, cooking, keeping the cabin livable. I don't hold with laziness and I don't have patience for complaints." "And what are you offering in return?" Helena asked, keeping her voice steady. "Fair wages, a warm place to sleep, plenty of food and respect. I'll give you the loft in my cabin. You'll have privacy." "I keep my word and I expect the same in return." He crossed his arms. "But you need to understand something right now, Mrs. Sutherland. I'm not looking for a wife. I'm not looking for companionship beyond what's needed to work together. I'm offering you a job, nothing more and nothing less. If that's not what you're after, best say so now." His bluntness was so refreshing after Frederick's oily charm that Helena almost smiled. "I'm not looking for a husband, Mr. Farrell. I'm looking for honest work that will allow me to earn enough money to eventually make my own way in the world. If you're offering that, then I accept your terms." Knox studied her for a long moment, then extended his hand. Helena shook it, noting the calluses and the careful control of his strength. His hand swallowed hers, but his grip was respectful, not crushing. "We leave in 2 hours," he said. "Bring only what you need. Space is limited and the mule is already carrying my winter supplies." "I'll be ready." As Knox moved into the store to fill his order, Margaret pulled Helena aside. "Are you certain about this?" "No," Helena admitted. "But I'm certain about what I'm avoiding, and that seems like reason enough." The 2 hours passed in a blur. Helena settled her small hotel bill, packed her carpetbag with her most practical possessions, and said goodbye to Margaret, who pressed a small package into her hands. "Herbs," the older woman explained, "for tea and for healing. You might need them up there. And Helena, if things don't work out, if you feel unsafe for any reason, you get yourself back to town and come straight to me. Understood?" Helena nodded, touched by the kindness from a woman who barely knew her. "Thank you for everything." Knox was waiting at the edge of town with his horse and pack mule. He tied Helena's carpetbag to the mule's load, then looked at her dress and shook his head. "You can't ride 10 miles up a mountain trail in that," he said practically. He dug through one of his packs and pulled out a pair of buckskin pants and a wool shirt. "These might be big, but they'll do better than that dress. You can change behind those rocks." Helena took the clothes without argument. She had learned long ago that false modesty was a luxury she couldn't afford. The buckskin pants were indeed too large, but she cinched them with her own belt and rolled the cuffs. The shirt hung on her frame, but it was warm. When she emerged, Knox was checking the mule's load, but she caught the brief flicker of surprise in his eyes before he turned away. "You'll ride behind me," he said, mounting his sturdy bay gelding. "Trail's too narrow in places for you to ride the mule. Hang on to my belt and keep your weight balanced." Helena had never ridden double on a horse before, but she climbed up behind Knox without protest, her hands gripping his belt as instructed. The horse moved forward with a steady gait, and they left Custer behind, following a narrow trail that led up into the pine-covered hills. The ride was long and mostly silent. Knox occasionally pointed out landmarks or warned her about a rough patch of trail ahead, but otherwise, he seemed content to let the wilderness speak for itself. Helena found herself oddly comfortable with the silence. After years of her first husband's unpredictable moods, where she had learned to read every word and gesture for signs of coming violence, there was something peaceful about Knox's quiet steadiness. The trail climbed steadily, winding through groves of ponderosa pine and aspen that were just beginning to turn gold with the approaching autumn. The air grew cooler and thinner, carrying the scent of pine resin and distant wood smoke. They passed a small creek that burbled over smooth stones, and Knox stopped to let the horse and mule drink. "We're about halfway," he said, offering Helena a canteen. "How are you managing?" "I'm fine," she said, and it was true. Her legs ached from gripping the horse, and her hands were stiff from holding Knox's belt, but she was managing. He nodded, his gray eyes studying her face. "You're tougher than you look." "I've had to be." Something passed between them in that moment, a recognition of shared experience perhaps, though neither of them named it. Knox turned away first, gathering the reins. "We should keep moving. I want to reach the cabin before dark." The second half of the journey was steeper, the trail becoming little more than a path through the trees. Helena caught glimpses of spectacular views when the forest opened up, valleys spreading below them like a rumpled green blanket, distant peaks rising against the impossibly blue sky. She understood now why Knox had chosen to live up here. There was a wildness to this place, a sense of freedom that spoke to something deep in her soul. The cabin appeared suddenly as they rounded a bend in the trail, nestled in a small clearing with a spectacular view of the valley below. It was larger than Helena had expected, built from solid logs with a stone chimney and a covered porch. Nearby stood a smaller structure that must be the smokehouse, and beyond that, a sturdy lean-to for the horse and mule. Knox dismounted and helped Helena down, his hands firm but impersonal on her waist. "Welcome to your home for the winter," he said. "It's not fancy, but it's solid." Helena looked around the clearing, taking in the neat woodpile, the well-maintained buildings, the garden plot that showed signs of recent harvest. Everything spoke of a man who took pride in his work and his home. "It's beautiful," she said honestly. Knox looked surprised by her response, then almost pleased. "Come on, I'll show you inside." The cabin's interior was dim but clean, a single large room with a massive stone fireplace at one end and a sturdy ladder leading to a loft above. There was a rough-hewn table with 2 chairs, shelves loaded with supplies, an iron stove for cooking, and a narrow bed in the corner. Pelts hung on stretching frames along one wall, and hooks held various tools and equipment. It smelled of pine smoke, leather, and something indefinable that Helena would come to recognize as simply the scent of Knox himself. "Loft is yours," Knox said, pointing upward. "I've got a feather tick up there, some blankets. It'll be warm enough once I get the fire going. There's a hook for hanging a blanket if you want privacy. I sleep down here." He gestured to the narrow bed. "Privy is out back, about 50 yards. There's a clear path. Don't wander off it, especially at night. Bears and mountain lions in these woods." Helena nodded, absorbing all the information. "What do you want me to do first?" Knox looked at her with approval. "Help me unload the mule, then I'll show you where everything goes. After that, if you're still willing, you can start supper while I tend to the animals. We'll talk about the work schedule tomorrow." They fell into an easy rhythm of work. Knox was a patient teacher, showing Helena where supplies were stored, how he liked things organized, what needed to be done daily and what could wait. He treated her like a competent partner rather than a helpless woman, which was a novel enough experience that Helena found herself relaxing slightly, though she kept her guard up out of long habit. As the sun began to set, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple, Helena prepared a simple meal of salt pork, beans, and the bread that Margaret had tucked into Knox's supplies. Knox came in from tending the animals, washed up at the basin near the door, and sat down at the table with a satisfied grunt. "Smells good," he said. They ate in comfortable silence, and Helena was surprised to find she was genuinely hungry. The mountain air and the day's work had given her an appetite she hadn't felt in years. After supper, Knox cleared the dishes while Helena unpacked her few belongings in the loft. It was a cozy space. The ceiling sloped but tall enough for her to stand in the center. The feather tick was soft, the blankets thick and clean. Someone, probably Knox himself, had even put a small mirror on a shelf and a hook for hanging clothes. When she climbed back down the ladder, Knox was sitting by the fireplace, working on repairing a leather harness. He looked up as she approached. "I need to set some things straight," he said quietly, "so there's no misunderstanding between us." Helena's stomach tightened, but she nodded. "Go ahead. I live up here because I don't do well with crowds and noise. The war did something to me, changed something inside, and I found I needed the quiet of the mountains to feel right again. I'm not running from the law, and I'm not hiding from debts. I just prefer my own company most of the time." He paused, choosing his words carefully. "But I'm not unkind and I'm not cruel. I'll never raise a hand to you or speak to you with disrespect. You'll work hard here, but I'll work just as hard beside you. If you need something, you ask. If something bothers you, you say so. I can't read minds and I don't hold with guessing games." Helena felt something tight in her chest begin to loosen. "I appreciate your honesty. I'm guessing you've got reasons for taking a job like this, reasons that might involve running from something or someone." Knox's gray eyes were steady on hers. "I won't pry, but I will say this. You're safe here. Whatever happened before, whoever hurt you, they can't reach you in these mountains. You have my word on that." Helena felt tears prick at her eyes and blinked them back. "How did you know?" "I recognize the look," he said simply. "I've seen it in the mirror often enough. Different reasons maybe, but the same wariness, the same need to feel safe." They sat in silence for a while, the fire crackling between them. Finally, Helena spoke, her voice soft but steady. "I was married before. He was cruel. When he died, I thought I was free, but I had nothing. No money, no prospects. I came west as a mail-order bride, but the man I was supposed to marry died before I arrived. Another man offered to take his place, but he was the kind of man who would have been worse than my first husband, so I chose this instead." She met Knox's eyes. "I'm afraid to trust again. Every instinct tells me to keep my walls up, to never let anyone close enough to hurt me, but I'm also tired of being afraid." Knox was quiet for a long moment, then he nodded slowly. "I'll earn it," he said. "Earn what? Your trust. Every single day. I'll earn it by keeping my word, by treating you fairly, by showing you through my actions that not all men are like the ones who hurt you." He leaned forward, his expression serious. "I won't ask you to trust me right away. I know it doesn't work like that, but I promise you this. I'll be worthy of it whenever you're ready to give it." Helena felt something shift inside her, like the first crack in a frozen river at the start of spring. "Why?" she whispered. "Why do you care?" "Because I know what it's like to be broken by life," Knox said quietly. "And I know what it's like to find a small piece of peace in these mountains. If I can help you find that too, then maybe there's more purpose to my life than I thought." That night, lying in the loft under the thick blankets, listening to the wind whisper through the pines outside, Helena felt something she hadn't felt in years. Not quite hope, not yet, but perhaps the possibility of hope. And for now, that was enough. The days that followed fell into a pattern. Helena woke before dawn to the sound of Knox stoking the fire below. She would climb down to find coffee already brewing and Knox preparing to head out to check his trap lines. She learned to prepare a quick breakfast that would fuel him for hours of work in the cold mountain air. And while he was gone, she tackled the endless work of preparing pelts. Knox was a patient teacher, showing her how to properly skin and scrape the hides without damaging the fur, how to stretch them on frames to dry, how to identify which pelts would bring the best prices. The work was hard and often unpleasant, her hands raw and aching by the end of each day. But there was also satisfaction in seeing the results of her labor, the growing stack of prime pelts that represented the fruits of their partnership. Knox kept his word in every way. He was respectful, keeping appropriate distance but also treating her as a capable equal. When she struggled with a particularly tough hide, he would show her a better technique but never made her feel incompetent. When she cooked a meal, he always thanked her, even when it was simple fare. When he spoke to her, it was with genuine interest in her thoughts and opinions. Slowly, carefully, Helena began to relax. The constant vigilance that had been her companion for so long began to ease, though she couldn't quite bring herself to let it go entirely. Knox seemed to understand this, never pushing, never demanding more than she was willing to give. One evening, about 3 weeks after her arrival, they sat by the fire after supper, Knox working on a new trap while Helena mended one of his shirts. The domestic comfort of the scene struck her suddenly, so different from the tense silence that had characterized evenings with her first husband. "Can I ask you something?" she said. Knox looked up from his work. "Go ahead. Why did you never marry? You said you weren't looking for a wife, but you must be, what, 35? Most men your age have families." Knox was quiet for a moment, his hands stilling on the trap. "I'm 36, he said finally. "And I suppose I never found the right woman, or maybe I never tried hard enough to find her. After the war, I was too broken to be any good to anyone. By the time I started to feel human again up here in the mountains, I'd gotten used to being alone. It seemed easier than trying to explain to someone why I wake up sometimes from nightmares, or why loud noises make me reach for a gun that isn't there, or why I need the quiet of the wilderness like other men need whiskey." Helena set down her mending, her heart aching for the pain she heard beneath his words. "What happened in the war? I was a scout for the cavalry, saw things, did things that no man should have to see or do, lost friends, made choices that still haunt me." He met her eyes. "I'm not proud of everything I did, but I did what I thought was necessary at the time. Doesn't make it easier to live with." "I understand," Helena said softly. Maybe not the specifics, but I understand what it's like to carry weight you can't put down. Your husband, Helena nodded. He was charming at first, swept me off my feet with pretty words and grand promises. My father tried to warn me, said there was something off about Richard, but I was 19 and thought I knew better. By the time I realized my father was right, I was married and trapped. She pulled her knees up to her chest, wrapping her arms around them. He never hit me where it would show. He was too clever for that. And he always apologized afterward, promised it would never happen again, told me he loved me. For a long time, I believed him. Or maybe I just wanted to believe him because the alternative was admitting I'd made a terrible mistake. How did you finally get free? A carriage accident. The horse spooked, the carriage overturned, and Richard's neck broke in the fall. Everyone said it was tragic, such a young man dying so suddenly. I stood at his funeral and felt nothing but relief, and then felt guilty for feeling relieved. She wiped at her eyes. I know it's wrong to be glad someone died, but I still am. Knox moved from his chair to sit beside her on the floor in front of the fireplace, careful to maintain a respectful distance but close enough that she could feel his warmth. That's not wrong, he said firmly. That's surviving. Anyone who judges you for being glad your tormentor is gone has never been tormented. Helena looked at him through tear-blurred eyes. You really believe that? I do. And I'll tell you something else. You're one of the strongest people I've ever met. It takes courage to survive what you survived. It takes even more courage to try again, to come west and start over, to take a chance on something unknown rather than accept something familiar but terrible. He reached out slowly, telegraphing his movement, and gently touched her hand. I meant what I said, Helena. I'll earn your trust every single day, and part of that is being honest with you, so I'll be honest now. I admire you. I admire your strength, your determination, your refusal to give up even when life has given you every reason to. You're remarkable. Helena felt her breath catch. No one had ever spoken to her like this, with such sincere respect and admiration. I'm not remarkable, I'm just trying to survive. That's what makes you remarkable, Knox said. His thumb brushed across her knuckles, a gentle touch that sent warmth spreading through her. You've been through hell, and you're still here, still fighting, still hoping for something better. That takes a kind of bravery most people never have to find. They sat like that for a long time, hands touching, the fire casting dancing shadows on the cabin walls. Helena felt something unfamiliar stirring in her chest, something that felt almost like trust but deeper and warmer. She was afraid to name it, afraid to acknowledge what was growing between them, but she also couldn't deny it anymore. Knox, she said softly. Yeah, thank you. For seeing me. For understanding. For being patient. He squeezed her hand gently. Nothing to thank me for, I'm just keeping my promise. As October gave way to November, the relationship between Helena and Knox continued to deepen. They worked together seamlessly now, anticipating each other's needs and movements. Knox taught Helena to read the signs of the forest, how to identify animal tracks in the snow that was beginning to fall more frequently, how to predict weather changes by watching the behavior of birds and the color of the sky. Helena found herself looking forward to Knox's return from the trap lines each day, found herself smiling at his dry humor and the rare but genuine smiles he gave her. She noticed little things about him. The way he always made sure she had the warmest seat by the fire. How he would leave small gifts for her, a particularly beautiful pine cone, a feather from a hawk, a smooth stone from the creek. The way his eyes softened when he looked at her, though he probably didn't realize she noticed. One afternoon, a storm rolled in with frightening speed, the wind howling around the cabin and snow falling so thick they could barely see the woodpile 20 feet away. Knox had been out checking the near trap lines and came back covered in snow, his lips blue with cold. "Get those wet clothes off," Helena said, already heating water for tea. "You'll catch your death." Knox stripped off his heavy coat and shirt with shaking hands, and Helena saw the scars for the first time. They crisscrossed his chest and back, some clean lines that spoke of blade wounds, others puckered and rough from bullets. She must have made some sound because Knox looked at her over his shoulder, his expression guarded. "Sorry," he said gruffly. "Should have warned you. I'm not pretty under the clothes." Helena stepped forward before she could second-guess herself and placed her hand gently on his back, tracing one of the longer scars. "These are marks of survival," she said softly. "There's nothing ugly about that." Knox turned to face her, and the intensity in his eyes made her breath catch. "Helena," he said, his voice rough with something she couldn't quite name. "I need to tell you something, but I'm afraid it might make you uncomfortable." Her heart started to pound. "What is it?" "I'm falling in love with you." The words came out blunt and honest, so very Knox. "I know I said this was just a job, and I know you came here to escape from men and marriage and all of that. I'm not asking for anything from you, and I don't expect you to feel the same way. But I promised I'd be honest with you, and it wouldn't be honest to keep hiding how I feel." Helena stared at him, her mind racing. Part of her wanted to run, to retreat to the safety of emotional distance. But a larger part, the part that had been growing stronger with each passing day, wanted to step forward into the unknown. "I'm afraid," she whispered. "I know. I'm afraid to trust that this is real. I'm afraid to believe that you mean what you say. I'm afraid that if I let myself care about you, you'll turn into someone else, someone cruel." Knox reached out slowly, giving her every chance to pull away, and cupped her face in his large, calloused hands. "I can't promise I'll never make mistakes or never disappoint you. I'm human, and I'm flawed, but I can promise that I will never deliberately hurt you. I will never raise my hand to you in anger. I will never use your vulnerabilities against you. I will spend every day trying to be worthy of whatever trust you can give me." His gray eyes searched hers. "I love you, Helena. I love your strength and your courage and your kindness. I love the way you face each day with determination even when you're afraid. I love the sound of your laugh, which I'm still trying to coax out of you more often. I love who I am when I'm with you." Tears streamed down Helena's face, but for once they weren't tears of pain or fear. "I think I'm falling in love with you too," she said, the words feeling like both a confession and a liberation. "It terrifies me, but it's true. When you're out on the trap lines, I worry about you. When you come back, I feel lighter. When you smile at me, I feel warm all the way through. I don't know if I'm ready for everything that love means, but I know I don't want to keep pretending I don't feel it." Knox's smile was like the sun breaking through storm clouds. "Then that's enough. We'll figure out the rest as we go." He leaned down slowly, giving her every opportunity to pull away, and brushed his lips against hers in the gentlest kiss Helena had ever experienced. It was tentative and sweet, a question more than a demand. Helena's hands came up to rest on his bare chest, feeling the steady beat of his heart beneath her palms, and she kissed him back with a mixture of hope and fear and longing that made her shake. When they finally pulled apart, Knox rested his forehead against hers. "I'll keep earning it," he said softly. "Your trust, your love, all of it. Every single day." The winter deepened, and with it, so did Helena and Knox's relationship. They moved carefully, both aware of the fragility of what they were building. Knox never pushed for more than Helena was ready to give, content to steal kisses by the fireplace and hold her hand while they worked side by side. Helena found herself slowly letting down the walls she had built so carefully, allowing herself to believe that this was real, that Knox's love was genuine and enduring. They talked for hours in the evenings, sharing stories of their pasts, their hopes for the future, their fears and dreams. Knox told her about his childhood in Kentucky, about a happy family torn apart by the war. Helena told him about her love of books, how she had once dreamed of becoming a teacher, how her marriage to Richard had stolen so many of her dreams. "You could still teach," Knox said one evening. "When spring comes, if you want, we could go back to Custer. Maybe there's a need for a teacher in one of the nearby settlements." Helena looked at him in surprise. "You'd leave the mountains?" "I'd compromise," Knox said carefully. "Maybe we could find a place between Custer and here, somewhere I could still trap but you could teach. Or maybe I'd find I don't need the solitude as much as I thought, now that I have you." He took her hand. "The mountains are important to me, but you're more important. We'll figure out something that works for both of us." The casual way he included her in his future plans, the easy assumption that they would face the coming years together, made Helena's heart swell with emotion. "I love you," she said, and this time the words came easily without fear. "I love you too," Knox replied, pulling her into his arms. "More than I thought I could love anyone." As Christmas approached, Knox surprised Helena by producing a small pine tree that he set up in the corner of the cabin and decorated with strings of berries and small carved wooden ornaments. "My mother always insisted on a Christmas tree," he said, looking almost bashful. "Thought you might like one too." Helena was enchanted. She made simple decorations from scraps of cloth and dried flowers, and on Christmas Eve, they sat together by the fireplace, drinking hot cider and watching the candlelight flicker on the little tree. "I have something for you," Knox said, reaching behind his chair. He pulled out a carefully wrapped package and handed it to her. Helena opened it with shaking hands to find a beautiful dress, deep green wool with practical but pretty embroidery at the collar and cuffs. "Knox, this is too much. I ordered it months ago, before you even arrived. Thought whoever came to work for me might need a decent dress." He looked embarrassed. "I guessed at the size. If it doesn't fit, I can try to alter it." Helena held the dress against her chest, tears in her eyes. "It's perfect. I love it. There's something else." Knox reached into his pocket and pulled out a small box. When he opened it, Helena saw a simple gold band, no gemstones or elaborate designs, just solid and honest like the man offering it. "I know we've only known each other a few months," Knox said, his voice slightly unsteady. "And I know you said you weren't looking for a husband. If this is too fast, just say so and I'll put it away and ask again later. But I love you, Helena, and I want to spend the rest of my life with you. I want to wake up every morning knowing you're here. I want to face every challenge together. I want to build a future with you, whatever shape that takes." He took a deep breath. "Will you marry me?" Helena looked at the ring, then at Knox's face, seeing the hope and vulnerability in his eyes. She thought about how far she had come from the frightened woman who had arrived in Custer just a few months ago. She thought about the walls she had built around her heart and how Knox had patiently, gently, persistently shown her that those walls weren't needed anymore. "Yes," she said, her voice strong and certain. "Yes, I'll marry you." Knox's smile was brilliant. He slipped the ring on her finger, then pulled her into his arms, kissing her with a passion and joy that took her breath away. When they finally pulled apart, both breathing hard, Helena laughed, a sound of pure happiness that echoed through the cabin. "I'm not afraid anymore," she said wonderingly. "I trust you, Knox, completely." "I'll never give you reason to regret that trust," Knox promised. "I'll earn it every single day for the rest of our lives." They were married in January, making the journey down to Custer on a clear, cold day when the snow sparkled like diamonds in the sunlight. Margaret Fletcher stood as Helena's witness, and the local minister performed a simple but heartfelt ceremony in the small church. Frederick Dalton attended, looking sour and disappointed, but Helena barely noticed him. She had eyes only for Knox, who looked at her like she was the most precious thing in the world. After the ceremony, they had dinner at the hotel with Margaret and a few of the town's residents who had become friendly with Knox over the years. As the sun began to set, Knox and Helena rode back up to their cabin, now truly their home together, not just a workplace. That night, in the warmth of the cabin with snow falling gently outside, Knox and Helena came together as husband and wife. Knox was infinitely patient and gentle, showing Helena that physical intimacy could be about love and connection rather than power and control. When she cried afterward, he held her close, understanding that these were tears of healing, of the final breaking of chains she had carried for too long. "I love you," she whispered against his chest. "I love you too," Knox replied, his arms tight around her. "Always." Winter eventually gave way to spring, and with the melting snow came new possibilities. Knox and Helena made several trips to Custer, and through Margaret's connections, learned that the small settlement of Rockford, just 5 miles from their cabin, was in desperate need of a teacher. The position came with a small salary and the use of a one-room schoolhouse. "It's perfect," Helena said excitedly. "I could teach during the week, and we'd still have the cabin for weekends and summers." Knox built a small cabin near Rockford, close enough to the school for convenience but far enough away for privacy. They kept the mountain cabin as well, retreating there whenever they needed the peace of the high timber. Helena proved to be an excellent teacher, beloved by her students and their families. Knox continued his trapping business, but also began offering guiding services to the occasional hunters and nature enthusiasts who came to the Black Hills. Their life was not always easy. There were hard winters and lean years, disagreements and challenges. But they faced everything together, Knox keeping his promise to earn Helena's trust every single day, Helena growing stronger and more confident with each passing year. In the spring of their second year of marriage, Helena discovered she was pregnant. Knox's joy was tempered by worry, knowing Helena's fear of becoming vulnerable again. But Helena surprised them both with her calm confidence. "I'm not afraid," she told him, placing his hand on her still flat belly. "I know you'll take care of us. I trust you completely." Their son was born in October, a healthy boy with Helena's auburn hair and Knox's gray eyes. They named him James, after Knox's father. Knox proved to be a devoted father, patient and gentle, teaching his son about the mountains and the wilderness as he grew. 2 years later, a daughter arrived, small and fierce from the moment she drew breath. They named her Margaret, after the woman who had helped bring Helena and Knox together. Little Margaret had her mother's determination and her father's quiet strength, and she wrapped both her parents around her tiny finger from the start. Life settled into a comfortable rhythm. Helena taught during the school year. Knox worked his trap lines and guided hunters, and together they raised their children with love and laughter. The cabin in the high timber remained their sanctuary, a place where they could escape from the world and remember where their love had begun. One evening, when James was 7 and Margaret was 5, Helena and Knox sat on the porch of their Rockford cabin, watching their children chase fireflies in the gathering dusk. Knox had his arm around Helena's shoulders, and she leaned into his warmth with the ease of long familiarity. "Do you ever regret it?" Knox asked softly. "Choosing this life, choosing me?" Helena looked up at him in genuine surprise. "Never, not for a single moment. You kept your promise, Knox. You've earned my trust every single day. You've shown me what love really means. You've given me a life I never dreamed I could have." "You saved me too," Knox said, kissing the top of her head. I was just existing up in those mountains, surviving but not really living. You taught me that I could trust again too, that I could open my heart without fear. That love was worth the risk. Mama, Papa, watch me, Margaret called, doing a clumsy cartwheel on the grass. Beautiful sweetheart, Helena called back, laughing. James came running up to the porch, breathless and excited. Papa, will you tell us the story again, about how you and Mama met? Knox and Helena exchanged a smile. It had become James's favorite story, the tale of how his mother had come to the mountains and how his father had earned her trust day by day. All right, Knox said, pulling James onto his lap while Margaret came running to claim Helena's lap. It was a September day in 1883, and a stagecoach arrived in Custer carrying the bravest woman I would ever meet. As Knox told the story, Helena listened with a smile, marveling at how their life had unfolded. She thought about the frightened woman she had been, afraid to trust, afraid to hope. She thought about Knox's patient determination to show her that love could be safe and good. She thought about the family they had built together, the life they had created from broken pieces and careful healing. The years continued to pass, bringing both joys and sorrows. They lost Margaret Fletcher to pneumonia when James was 10, mourning the loss of the woman who had changed both their lives. Knox's nightmares from the war never fully went away, but Helena learned how to gently wake him and hold him until the shadows receded. Helena sometimes still flinched at sudden loud noises or unexpected movements, old reflexes that probably would never completely fade. But Knox always understood, never taking offense. They added to their family over the years. Another son, David, arrived when Margaret was 6, and then twin girls, Alice and Rose, when Helena was 38, making their family complete. The cabin near Rockford was expanded multiple times to accommodate their growing brood, but they still made regular trips to the original cabin in the high timber, all of them needing that connection to the wild places. Knox taught all his children to respect the wilderness, to read the signs of nature, to move through the forest with skill and care. Helena taught them to love learning, to value education, to treat all people with kindness and respect. Together, they created a home filled with love and laughter, where children grew up knowing they were safe and cherished. James grew into a fine young man who became a forest ranger, dedicating his life to protecting the wilderness his father loved. Margaret inherited her mother's passion for teaching and took over Helena's position at the Rockford School when Helena finally retired. David became a carpenter and builder, staying close to home and eventually building houses for his siblings as they started families of their own. The twins, Alice and Rose, were inseparable and eventually opened a small inn near Rockford that catered to visitors to the Black Hills, regaling their guests with stories of growing up in the mountains. As Knox and Helena grew older, they spent more and more time at the cabin in the high timber, finding peace in the quiet rhythms of mountain life. They would sit on the porch in the evenings, holding hands and watching the sun set over the valleys below, counting their blessings and marveling at the life they had built. One evening, when Knox was 62 and Helena was 58, they sat together by the fireplace in the mountain cabin, the same fireplace where they had first opened their hearts to each other so many years ago. Outside, snow was falling gently, the world hushed and peaceful. "I've been thinking," Helena said softly, her head resting on Knox's shoulder, "about that first night when you promised to earn my trust every single day." "I remember," Knox said, his arm tightening around her. "You've kept that promise for 26 years. Not just with words, but with actions, with patience and kindness and unwavering love. You've shown me every single day what it means to be truly loved and valued." Knox turned to look at her, his gray eyes, now crinkled with age, still holding the same warmth and devotion they had always held. "It was never a burden, Helena. Loving you, earning your trust, being worthy of you, that's been my greatest privilege. You took a broken man and showed him how to live again. You gave me a family, a purpose, a reason to be grateful for every new day." Helena cupped his weathered face in her hands. "We saved each other, I think. Two broken people who found wholeness together." "We did," Knox agreed, kissing her gently. "And I'd do it all again in a heartbeat. Every moment, every challenge, every joy, all of it." They sat in comfortable silence, watching the fire dance, feeling the weight of years well lived and love well earned. Outside, the mountains stood eternal and unchanged, witnesses to their story, guardians of the life they had built together. The years continued their steady march. Knox and Helena celebrated their 30th anniversary, surrounded by children, grandchildren, and friends, a testament to the love that had grown from fear and hesitation into something unshakable and enduring. They faced the challenges of aging together, Knox's joints growing stiff from years of hard work, Helena's eyesight dimming slightly, but neither ever doubting the other's love or commitment. When Knox was 68, he had a mild heart episode that frightened them both. The doctor in Custer advised him to slow down, to stop working the trap lines, to take things easier. Knox struggled with the advice, his identity so wrapped up in his work and his connection to the mountains. "You've earned the right to rest," Helena told him gently. "You've worked hard your entire life. Now it's time to let our children take care of things and just enjoy our time together." "I don't know how to just sit idle," Knox admitted. "Then don't sit idle. Read the books you've never had time for. Teach your grandchildren everything you know about the wilderness. Help David with his building projects. Plant a garden with me. We'll find a new rhythm just like we always have." And they did. Knox discovered a talent for carving, creating beautiful wooden toys for his grandchildren and intricate pieces that David's wife sold in town. Helena expanded her vegetable garden, supplying fresh produce to half the settlement. They took long, slow walks through the forest, moving at a pace that accommodated Knox's aging body but still allowed them to appreciate the beauty around them. On their 35th anniversary, their children threw them a grand celebration in Rockford. The entire town seemed to turn out, testament to the respect and affection Knox and Helena had earned over the years. James gave a speech about his parents' love story, bringing tears to many eyes with his description of two wounded souls finding healing in each other. "My father promised my mother he would earn her trust every single day," James said, his voice strong and clear. "And he kept that promise for 35 years. But what he didn't realize was that my mother was keeping the same promise to him. They earned each other's trust, each other's love, every single day. That's what real love is. Not the easy passion of youth, but the steady, determined choice to love and honor and cherish, day after day, year after year, through all the joys and sorrows life brings." Knox and Helena stood together, his arm around her waist, her head on his shoulder, and accepted the love and congratulations of the community they had become part of. Looking around at the faces of their children, grandchildren, and friends, Helena felt a profound sense of gratitude for the journey that had brought her here. As the celebration wound down and the sun began to set, Knox and Helena walked slowly back to their cabin, comfortable in the silence that had always been part of their relationship. On the porch, Knox turned to Helena and took both her hands in his. "I love you," he said simply. "More today than yesterday, more tomorrow than today. That's how it's always been with us." "I love you too," Helena replied, reaching up to touch his weathered face. "Thank you for keeping your promise. Thank you for earning my trust every single day. Thank you for showing me what love really means. Thank you for trusting me, Knox said, his voice thick with emotion. Thank you for taking a chance on a broken mountain man. Thank you for building this life with me. They kissed, a gentle touch that held 35 years of love and commitment and unwavering devotion. Then they went inside their home, into the warmth and comfort they had created together, ready to face whatever years remained with the same courage and love that had carried them this far. The seasons continued to turn. Knox's health gradually declined, but he remained mentally sharp and emotionally present, still finding ways to show Helena his love every day. When he could no longer walk the forest trails, he sat on the porch and watched the wildlife, pointing out hawks and deer to whichever grandchildren were visiting. When his hands became too stiff to carve, he told stories instead, keeping their family history alive for the next generation. Helena remained active longer, still tending her garden and cooking meals for the steady stream of children and grandchildren who visited. But she never strayed far from Knox's side, unwilling to miss a moment of their time together. On a clear October morning, 41 years after they first met, Knox did not wake up. Helena had been sleeping beside him, as she had for decades, and she woke to find him peaceful and still, finally free from the pain that had plagued his final months. She held his hand and wept, not from regret or bitterness, but from gratitude for the life they had shared and sorrow that their time together had ended. The funeral was held at the church in Custer, where they had married, and it seemed the entire county turned out to pay their respects. James, now a man in his late 30s with graying hair at his temples, gave the eulogy, speaking of his father's quiet strength, his unwavering integrity, his deep capacity for love. "My father was not a perfect man," James said, his voice steady despite his tears. "But he was a good man. He kept his promises. He loved deeply and faithfully. He showed us all what it means to live with honor and compassion. And he earned my mother's trust every single day of their marriage, just as he promised he would." After the service, Helena stood beside Knox's grave, surrounded by her children and grandchildren. She thought about the frightened woman who had stepped off that stagecoach so long ago, afraid to trust, afraid to hope. She thought about the patient mountain man who had seen past her fear to the strength beneath. She thought about the life they had built together, brick by brick, day by day, choice by choice. "You kept your promise," she whispered to the fresh-turned earth. "Every single day. And I'll carry that love with me for whatever time I have left." Helena lived for another 12 years after Knox's death, surrounded by family and sustained by memories of their life together. She told stories about Knox to her grandchildren and great-grandchildren, making sure they understood the man he had been and the love he had given so freely. She kept the cabin in the high timber exactly as it had been, visiting regularly to feel close to Knox's spirit. When Helena was 70 years old, she passed away peacefully in her sleep, in the very cabin where she had first learned to trust again. Her children found her in the morning, a slight smile on her face, her hand reaching out as if to grasp someone else's hand. They buried her beside Knox on a hillside overlooking the valley, with a view of the mountains they had both loved so deeply. The headstone was simple, bearing both their names and a single inscription. They earned each other's trust every single day. Their story became legend in the Black Hills, passed down through generations. People spoke of the mail-order bride who had been afraid to trust and the mountain man who had promised to earn it every single day, and how that promise had become a love story for the ages. Young couples, facing their own challenges and fears, would visit the graves and ask for the same strength and devotion that Knox and Helena had shown each other. The cabin in the high timber became a family treasure, maintained by generations of descendants who understood its significance. James's grandson eventually turned it into a small museum, preserving not just the physical space, but the story of the love that had grown there. Visitors came from across the country to see the place where two broken people had found healing and wholeness in each other. And in the quiet moments, when the wind whispered through the pines and the setting sun painted the sky in shades of gold and crimson, some people claimed they could feel the presence of that love still lingering in the mountains, eternal and unshakable, a testament to the power of patience, kindness, and unwavering devotion. Knox and Helena's legacy lived on not just in their descendants, but in the countless lives they touched with their example of what love could be when it was built on trust earned day by day, moment by moment, choice by choice. They proved that broken hearts could heal, that trust could be rebuilt, and that love, when nurtured with care and honored with commitment, could overcome even the deepest wounds and create something beautiful and enduring. Their story remained a beacon of hope for anyone who had been hurt, anyone who was afraid to trust, anyone who doubted that true love existed. It stood as proof that the right person, with patience and genuine devotion, could help heal even the most wounded heart. And it reminded everyone who heard it that the greatest love stories are not about grand gestures or sweeping romance, but about the quiet, steady choice to love and honor and cherish every single day for all the days of a life. In the end, Knox had kept his promise. He had earned Helena's trust every single day of their marriage, and Helena had given him the gift of her trust, her love, and her whole heart. Together, they had created something rare and precious, a love that transcended fear and pain, a partnership built on mutual respect and unwavering devotion. Their children carried forward the lessons they had learned from their parents' example, building strong marriages and raising children who understood the value of commitment and the power of love. Their grandchildren and great-grandchildren told the story proudly, knowing that they were part of something special, descended from two people who had shown the world what was possible when broken hearts found healing in each other. And high in the Black Hills of South Dakota, in a cabin where two souls had once found refuge and love, the spirit of that devotion lingered still, whispering promises to the wind, reminding all who passed through that true love, earned day by day and honored moment by moment, could indeed last forever.